Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports
but other sightings apparently were taken more seriously.
And one in particular, an incident called the Rendlesham Forest Incident, also known as Britain's Roswell. This was in 1980, shortly after Christmas, when a few American airmen who were stationed in the UK...
Vinnie Adams. The following is an interview with Jeff Nuccetelli. Jeff was an Air Force security officer based at Vandenberg Air Force Base back in 2003 when the Red Square UFO incident occurred. If you enjoy this content, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I hope you enjoy this interview with Jeff Nuccetelli. So Jeff, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me today. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
Yeah, not bad at all. Really looking forward to this conversation. So let's get into it. But first, I think the best thing to do would be just to give us a bit of your background and how you ended up being at Vandenberg back in 2003.
So I joined the Air Force in 1993, and initially I was a security specialist, and then later it was broke up into law enforcement and security. And initially I was a security specialist, and then later the Air Force combined the two career fields, the law enforcement aspect and the security, along with our K-9 and our combat arms training. And they combined it all into one career field called security forces. So, so yeah, I joined in 93, and then I got heavily involved in law enforcement when I went to Vandenberg. And I had an opportunity there to work with a lot of civilian law enforcement organizations, some really high caliber ones like California Highway Patrol, Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office, and on and on. And the reason for that was Vandenberg has a lot of joint or proprietary jurisdiction, meaning we have California Highway 101 leads to 1 and goes right through Vandenberg. So there were portions of the highway that we had exclusive jurisdiction. So we would have to respond to any incidents on the highway, like an accident, or sometimes it was a major route for drug smuggling, human trafficking, basically everything coming south, north through California. So it was a very busy law enforcement mission there. So I got to Vandenberg in 1999. And then by 2003, when the incident occurred, I was assigned to Bravo flight. Each unit is made up of 4 flights of cops, with about 60 or more people per flight. And I was assigned to Bravo flight. At the time, I was the senior law enforcement patrolman. And yeah, that's how I got involved. I came into work one day and I walked into a movie.
Yeah, we'll get into that. But could you just give us some idea about Vandenberg itself? This is a huge facility in itself. And can you talk about what kind of was going on there at the time?
So yeah, Vandenberg was part of Space Command at the time.
Okay.
And they had, after the war started in 2001, President Bush had a new initiative for the National Missile Defense Project. And that was basically a national project to protect us from incoming ballistic missiles and other threats. So the base became extremely busy. They were building out all new infrastructure, testing these new weapon systems, and we had to guard all of those facilities. So me and my coworkers were involved in guarding the facilities and just maintaining security. So at that point in 2003, we were very busy. We were doing very important launches, testing out the efficacy of the weapon system. And that's basically what Vandenberg is there for. It's a massive space launch installation with multiple launch facilities and platforms. And yeah, and that's what we did. We guarded all of those assets.
Interesting. Were there any nukes on base at the time?
No.
We
didn't have. Vandenberg had tested nuclear weapons, I think in the 50s and 60s, but by the time I had got there, there were no nukes.
Interesting. The only reason I ask is because you hear about UFO incidents always over these facilities that are storing nukes or have some nuclear connections. So I thought I'd check, but that's interesting. So let's get to this event, because I know it's more than kind of just one event, isn't it? But if we can kind of go from where it started and sort of paint a really clear picture of it, if you don't mind.
So yeah, so the event began in October 2003, October 14th. And I came on shift sometime in the late afternoon. I was working the midnight shift, and I was relieving Delta Flight. Delta Flight had worked the day shift. So it started out as a regular day. I drove into work, and when I arrived, there was a large group of other cops at the smoking pit right across from our armory. And so I knew something was up when I showed up. And as I pulled in to the parking lot, everybody started to point at me, and I could tell they were excited to tell me something big had happened. And that wasn't, very unusual. It was a very busy base. We had a very robust law enforcement mission, so it wasn't uncommon for me to come in and hear some wild tale about, something that had happened earlier in the day. So yeah, I said, okay, something's up. I parked my truck. I walked over to the smoke pit, and everybody starts to tell me that they had this real world UFO encounter at 08:45 in the morning. And, initially I was a little skeptical, but very quickly I realized that they were not joking around, and this was an actual event.
Right.
So the initial briefing I got was that a group of Boeing contractors had been working out at Launch Facility 21 on North Base, about 30 minutes drive from our command center. And they had called in that a gigantic UFO had been floating over the launch facility for an extended period of time. And they had eventually, the contractors called the range control to report it. And range control had made a number of calls to, the weather radar stations, trying to verify if there were balloons up or if anyone knew what was going on.
Mm.
And they received, confirmation that there were no weather balloons, nothing on radar. And then eventually the range control on-duty dispatcher contacted the law enforcement desk, our command center, and reported the incident. And at that point, all the post and patrols were notified that there was an incident, and the on-duty flight chief and senior patrolman responded out to the launch facility, made contact with the contractors, got the story, had them write sworn written statements. And by that time, the patrolman, the object had drifted off to the east onto the base. And the patrolman didn't report seeing anything anomalous. So they returned back to the squadron, filed the incident in the blotter, and then they called in the technical sergeant from range control who had made the initial notification to the cops. And they brought him in, they interviewed him and had him write a sworn written statement. And I have his statement. And now would be a good time. I have the blotter and I have the statement, and
yep,
we can read that.
That would be amazing. Yes, please.
Yeah. So what I've done, just so everyone knows, what I've hand typed out verbatim a copy of the blotter and the incident, and I've X'd out the name. So when I'm reading it, it'll read something like Master Sergeant X, whatever. So yeah, let me pull them up. Hopefully we won't have any issues when I pull this document up. Let me know.
No problem at all.
I'll read the blotter first.
Okay.
So this blotter entry was from the blotter that ran from 0500 hours, October 14th, 2003 to 0500 hours on 15 October. So this blotter would have basically chronicled everything that happened on Delta flight in the daytime and everything on Bravo flight in the evening.
Right.
So this is blotter entry number 13 at 0845 hours local. The title is Patrol Response Unidentified Flying Object. And the first line is the complainant, that's Tech Sergeant X from Range Control. And then 3 witnesses are listed, each Boeing contractors, along with their duty phone numbers. And then here's the written summary. Tech Sergeant X notified the Security Forces Control Center he received a call telling him there was a red square object hovering in the air above LF-21. Master Sergeant X, Police 1, and Technical Sergeant X, Police 1 Alpha, were dispatched and responded. Upon arriving on scene, there was no evidence of any hovering objects in the vicinity. Senior Master Sergeant X from Range Control and Staff Sergeant X from Base Operations were notified and relayed there were no sightings on their radar during that time period. Master Sergeant X approached the witnesses at LF-21 and LF-10 who reported seeing the unidentified flying object. For more information, refer to Air Force Form 1168. And then it has the notifications listed. So the people notified were Lieutenant Colonel X, who was the Security Forces commander, my commander. Senior Master Sergeant X, he was the Security Forces Operations Superintendent. Staff Sergeant X with Air Force OSI. Staff Sergeant X with Security Forces Investigations.
Right.
Special Agent X with OSI. And Airman First Class X with the 30th Space Wing Command Post. So that's the official record of what the police chronicled after the incident was reported and investigated. So that's the official document that I have.
That's amazing. It's good that they still have some documentation. It's not just, word of mouth. That's incredible.
Yeah. And had I not had this documentation, honestly, I don't think I would have came forward.
Right.
I really needed to have something backing me up that could be investigated and vetted and to give me the confidence to come forward
Sure.
with the story, because it is, it's an unbelievable story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, before we go any further, this might be a good time because this was brought to a lot of the public's attention at the July 26th hearings. And I'd just like to play a quick clip from that. So let me just bring that up. Bear with me.
My next question would actually be for Mr. Graves. Can you please explain to me in detail the event that occurred at Vandenberg Air Force Base?
Certainly. In the 2003 timeframe, a large group of Boeing contractors were operating near one of the launch facilities at Vandenberg Air Force Base when they observed a very large 100-yard sided red square approach the base from the ocean and hover at low altitude over one of the launch facilities. This object remained for about 45 seconds or so before darting off over the mountains. There was a similar event within 24 hours later in the evening. This was a morning event, I believe 8:45 in the morning. Later in the evening, post-sunset, there were reports of other sightings on base, including some aggressive behaviors. These objects were approaching some of the security guards at rapid speeds before darting off. And this is information that was received through one of the witnesses that have approached me at Americans for Safe Aerospace.
Was this documented in any official form, whether it was a police blotter?
Yes, they had official documentation and records from the event that the witness held over the years.
And I'm not going to ask you to do it right now for time reasons, but you'd be able to sketch what was witnessed, correct? And have you seen that before on any other equipment and or during your flight time?
I have not seen what they've described. This object was estimated to be almost the size of a football field, and I have not seen anything personally that large.
Okay, and then another question on follow-up referencing the gimbal video.
Okay. Well, that's huge. That is so huge to have it in such a big public forum like that. How did that feel for you at that time?
The hearing to me was one of the biggest things ever for me. It was truly historic, and I was excited for Ryan and Fravor and Rush to be there, and excited for the whole forum. So for me, it was like watching the biggest Super Bowl ever. And I was sitting there watching it and cheering and clapping, and I had a beer, and I was just having the time of my life. And then she said that, and I literally fell out of my chair. I couldn't believe it because I was not prepared.
Sure.
for that, and Ryan wasn't prepared, and I was not expecting it, and Ryan handled it great.
Yeah.
He recalled everything really well, and I was elated and terrified at the same time, because I was like, oh my God, I wasn't ready. I just kind of, a few weeks before that had gotten really involved, and then all of a sudden it was on the national stage, and
Yeah.
so it was an amazing moment. And after that, I was like, well, now it's out. And another thing I think it's important for people to know: prior to the hearing, I had not spoken with the other witnesses yet.
Right.
I had gone to Ryan with Americans for Safe Aerospace and Aero, and I'd spoken to some members of Congress and the Senate, but I had not spoken to my other friends that had encountered these objects. So then a couple of days went by, and I started to track them down, and they had all seen the hearing, and they're like, what are you getting us into, man? But they were excited. They were ready. They've been sitting on these events for 20 years, and they're ready to come out and tell their story. So it was great having their support. I've got a bunch of people that I trust, and they're good friends of mine, and we served together, and we went through some real tough times together.
Right.
And having their hand on my shoulder gave me a lot of courage, especially when I came out on the Merged podcast.
Yeah.
So it's been an amazing experience, man. It's been wild.
Yeah, no, it's amazing that you came forward. So I really respect that an awful lot. But you mentioned there that you'd spoken to Arrow. What was that like? Because Arrow's kind of had a lot of flax in the last sort of year. So how was your experience?
And well deserved. Some of the criticism they've received is very well, deserved. Some of the public statements that were made by Arrow, I started to question what I was doing and who I was talking to. But in the end, I wanted to go through the process in an official manner.
Of course.
I wanted to give them the evidence, and then I wanted to see where it would go. So it was a bit of a leap of faith. But my experience with Arrow was overwhelmingly positive.
Okay.
And strangely enough, a bit of a coincidence, but I don't really believe in coincidences. The investigator from Arrow and I, after we were talking for a while, we realized that we had actually been at Vandenberg together at the same time frame, right around that time frame, 2003, 2004. He had been there for another matter. And we actually know some of the same bad actors, we'll put it that way.
Oh.
So we started to, we were talking, and he mentioned a name, and I said, oh, I know him. And he said, and then we were taught we know some of the same people and in a professional capacity. So, there was some rapport built there. There was some trust. We know some of the same people. We were working, in the same domain, if you will, in law enforcement. And we got along really well, and we established trust on the phone call. And I shared not only that information, but other events that have happened at Vandenberg that have not been made public. And, he seemed legitimately interested in the case. He shared other information from other cases with me. And I felt that he was going to do what he said. And what he said he was going to do was look for historical records of the event, go to Vandenberg, look for, hard copies and digital copies, search through different kinds of archives that he has access to, and also look at special access programs to try to verify if it was something of ours. So overwhelmingly positive. And it was a collaborative effort. He invited me to share more information as I, because I let him know that I'm still in the process of tracking down other witnesses. There's a lot of people that we were on duty with on Bravo flight and Delta flight that have not come forward.
Right.
And we're trying to encourage them, but not pressure people.
Of Of course.
come forward. And then he has reached out a few times since then and provided me updates and on where the case is going. So overall, my experience with Arrow, they were extremely professional, courteous, interested, open to share information. It was a two-way communication, a collaboration, and
it's really encouraging to hear, actually, after all the negativity.
And I think people need to understand too, and this is just in general. The people working on the programs, whether it be police or firefighters or EMTs, are not the management.
Yeah.
Management has different priorities than the people on the ground doing the work. And typically, in my experience, the people doing the work care.
Yeah.
They want to do a good job. They're conscientious people. They're curious people. And they try their hardest to get to the bottom of these cases. Management's different. They have different priorities and they answer to different people. So I think it's important that people try to separate how an agency is acting or the head of an agency is acting and separate that from the troops on the ground and the people, analysts and cops and investigators that are actually doing the work.
Yeah, no, it's a really fair point. Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned there, you were in the process of tracking down other witnesses. Just to be clear, there were these Boeing contractors that were witnesses, but there were other individuals from the base separate in a different area who witnessed this. It wasn't just one group of people, was it?
Now, the initial Red Square event was initially only seen by the 3 Boeing contractors.
Okay, right.
As far as I know. Later that evening, we had multiple incursions.
Okay. Well, we'll get to that in a minute, if that's all right. Let's just go back to the day when you'd got onto base and you were told this information and, these guys were serious. What was the mood like? And how did the base respond to the incident? Or was it just business as usual for the rest of the day?
As far as the general base population, I'm not sure because
Okay.
I was on duty, focused. I'm surrounded by cops.
Okay.
So I didn't have a lot of information on how the rest of the wing were responding. But the climate at work was excitement, disbelief. There was just this energy because, it was such a fantastical event. People were having a hard time wrapping their mind around it.
Yeah.
And, some people literally just didn't want to engage in conversation about it. They were like, I don't know what that is and I don't want to talk about it. And other people like me wanted to do nothing except talk about it. Like, what is happening? This is real. And a lot of, the people that I was close with were extremely excited about it. And we went out that night looking for UFOs and some of my buddies found them. So,
let's get into that. Because I don't think that's, everyone, I think we know about this Red Square case now, but I think it'd be great to kind of get more details on these follow-up incursions.
Well, before we get to that, let me read to you the witness statement that I do have in my possession from the Red Square event that happened that morning.
Absolutely.
So we'll bring that up.
So this is one of the Boeing contractors' direct witnesses.
No, this is the technical sergeant that called in from range control. So he received the complaint from the contractors.
Okay, right.
He got the call from the site saying there's an enormous UFO out there. And he called the law enforcement desk and relayed all that information to us.
Brilliant.
So they brought him in later in the day and did a interview with him.
Okay, wonderful.
Let me pull that up. So he's not a direct witness. He's an indirect witness.
Sure.
So this is Air Force Form 1168, Statement of Witness, dated 14 October 2003 at 15:31 hours local, so a little bit in the afternoon. The narrative. I, Technical Sergeant X, was working on shift at Missile Maintenance Operations Center on 14 October 03 at approximately 0900 hours. Received a call from Refurb maintenance team, Mr. X, stating that there was a large floating object over the hill by LF-21. I asked how big it was, And he replied, it was huge. I then asked, is it bigger than 20 feet? And he replied, yes. He indicated that it was a large square shape and red in color. He also indicated that it was not making any noise, just floating in the air. At that time, I called weather to see if they had sent up any weather balloons or test equipment. Negative response. Then I called security forces to inquire if they were notified about any such objects. Negative response. I also contacted command post and the 76th Helicopter Squadron. Negative response. At this time, I attempted to call Mr. X back at LF10 to get an update. No answer on site due to maintenance in progress. Security forces said that they would send a unit out to investigate. The unit reported no signs of any floating objects. At approximately 11:15 hours, I was able to contact Mr. X on site, and he indicated that the object floated over the hilltops and then disappeared to the east. Security forces called me for my personal info and requested that I would come by and make a statement. End of statement.
Wow. I mean, I think what's interesting about the actual object itself is that it's described as square shaped, but I think I heard in your conversation with Ryan Graves that it's not like a cube. It is more like a flat object. Am I right in saying that?
Now that information is from my recollection from reading the original Boeing contractor statements.
Okay.
But like I said, I had lost those in about 2012. So everything that I'm quoting from that is from memory. And the issue that I'm having is there were so many events that happened in a 1 month period, and then other events that happened later at Vandenberg, that some of the stories are mixed up in my head.
Sure.
So, but there is one direct witness that I'm friends with that has come forward and eventually will be coming forward that saw this object later that night. And it was at least 100 yards, if not.
Wow.
It was an enormous, enormous object.
Yeah.
And so
is that the kind of the next thing that kind of happened? So, and this is the same evening, October 14th.
Yeah.
Could you kind of describe where, you know, what his role was at the time and what he was doing, and was he on his own? All that kind of information.
So we go on the shift that night, and this particular individual, he actually worked for me on law enforcement but at the time he was posted on security because we had posted people at all these new launch facilities. So they were taking basically my manpower, my gate guards and patrolmen, and putting them on security to backfill the security.
Right.
So he was posted on South Base at another launch facility, one of I think the largest facility we have there, called Space Launch Facility 4. We call that Slick 4.
Right.
I think that's where SpaceX launches out of now.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And all that was happening, I think, with SpaceX when I left in 2006 timeframe.
Right.
But back in 2003, that was our primary launch facility for the really large rockets, like the big Titan 4s that I think went to the moon. So this complex is enormous, and we had at least 6 people posted there. 2 people on an internal security patrol in a truck, 2 other people on an external security patrol, and then we had an entry control point that handles all traffic in and out, vehicles and personnel. And I think we had 2 people there. So at least 6 people right on that site. And sometime in that evening, I had just returned. I had been out looking for the UFOs. I had got night vision goggles and I had a thermal imager, and I was out on the coast driving around along with some other people who were doing this. And I had returned to the command center, and we were all just sitting around talking about it with the dispatchers. I think there was about 4 or 5 of us on the command center.
Okay.
And then a radio transmission came in from security patrol at Slick 4. And they said something to the effect of, be advised, we have a strange light over the ocean to the west off the coast. And the dispatcher told them, roger that, keep a visual on it, notify us if anything happens. And then very rapidly, the transmission started to come in more frantically. The object is moving, it's changing directions, it's moving erratically. So I started to get up and get ready to drive out there. I'm like, okay, that's not a fishing boat. I grabbed my gear and I got ready to jump in the car, and then all hell broke loose. And the transmission started to come in. People were frantic and screaming. It's getting bigger. It's getting closer. It's coming right at us. And now it's right here.
Wow.
And, multiple transmissions, people talking all over the radio, all over the net. The dispatcher tried to get command and control the situation. I jumped in my car, started hauling out. There was about a 30-minute drive to South Base from where I was.
Okay.
And yeah, the dispatcher told all postal patrols to be advised, we have a security incident at Slick 4, be on the lookout. And then as I drove out there, more information was coming in. They had said something to the effect that the object had darted off. And then, I get out there and I talk to everybody, and it's just disbelief. People are scared. Some people are excited. Nobody can believe what just happened. And I talked to everybody, and basically what happened was they saw the light. Everyone was observing it. What is that? Strange. It got closer and bigger, and then it just zoomed in. And what they described was this truly massive, at least 100-yard object. And as it got closer, the light went out. It was illuminated.
Okay.
And then the light went out, and it was this enormous black matte object. And it flew right from the water over the coast, right up to the entry control point, and just stopped and hovered. And they were all these patrolmen were together. They were all at the entry control point when this happened. And they were all just standing outside staring at it. And it was there for about 45 seconds. They were all looking at each other, and then it just floated away. And that's what happened.
That's incredible. Twice in one day, and it both times came from the west, so across the ocean, which, there's nothing out there really, is there?
No. I think Catalina Island and things are a bit to the south, but
yeah.
And, there are fishing boats in that area, but
that's yeah. I'm just trying to put myself in their shoes, and it would just, it's something to see a UFO anyway, but to see something that size, and I mean, it would blow my mind. Incredible.
So yeah.
And there was nothing, to your awareness, nothing was ever captured on radar or any other technological data?
Not that I'm aware. But,
right.
But the thing is, and this is what I told Arrow, we had very advanced sensor equipment there on the installation. We had multiple capabilities and multiple different agencies with those capabilities. Because we did have, we had real world threats to the base. We had, and I worked on some of this, these anti-terrorism issues. Right. We would have launches, and we would have bad actors that would say, "We're going to blow this rocket up. We're going to hike into the mountains and shoot it with a 30-06." And so we had to take that serious. We had real serious threats to the installation, and I worked on a lot of those launches. So we took it very serious. We had amazing capabilities. So there is a potential that some of the other agencies or even the Air Force got data, but I wouldn't know about it.
Of course.
I wasn't in the loop. The intelligence data that I would see was more pertinent to, people trying to break onto the installation, disrupt the launch, protest activity, things like that. I wouldn't have been provided with sensor data.
Of course.
That's what I was hoping Arrow could do for me is going
Find
to find
it.
out, like, do we have radar data? Do we have any other collaborating information other than the witness statements?
Mm. And you mentioned that they were willing to share things with you, but do you think if they were able to find that data, that it may be that they're not able to share it with you due to clearances and things like that?
Probably. I don't have a need to know.
Right.
And even if those sensor systems are now obsolete, it's unlikely that they would provide that information. And Arrow, the other thing about Arrow is that is actually not their mandate.
Mm.
Their mandate is to resolve the cases, but not for public consumption.
Sure.
So even if they do pull data and they can verify things, it's unlikely that they would share that with me or the public.
I mean,
I
if
was more
anyone,
interested in them finding these contractors
yeah,
and having them come out and people not have to worry about my secondhand recollection of what they wrote. I would hope the contractors would come out and tell everyone what they saw.
yeah, that would be amazing. Absolutely. I mean, just to paint a picture of, we're talking about potential terrorist activity or adversarial threats. Were there ever any incidents of incursions by China or unknown sort of state actors, let's say?
Not state actors. It was mostly local protest activity, and you would have sort of lone wolf individuals that would make threats to the base. They didn't want space weaponized, or they had
Right.
political agendas, and it was mostly local threats like that we had to deal with. But we had people that would conduct incursions. We had people that try to come in from the ocean on Zodiac boats to disrupt these launches. We had to rescue them, and people that would come over the mountains and try to get on the installation, and we knew they were coming.
Yeah.
So we would, and I did a lot of that. I would go out with other teams into the mountains, and we would capture these people when they tried to get onto the installation. So, but nothing like other state actors. It was local fringe elements.
Yeah. No, I think what I was just trying to paint a picture of is that there's no way that this object, well, not no way, but it really doesn't point to it being something like an adversarial, flying something over and people not being sure what they're seeing. They're very clearly seeing an unidentified flying object that's 100 yards, and it's not going to be mistaken for Chinese tech.
Yeah, when you see these things, and I have, it doesn't look or feel like anything that we have.
Right.
It never even entered my mind that might be some kind of advanced human technology.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So you mentioned there that you've seen things. Is this since 2003?
It was my personal event was also at Vandenberg. I was off duty.
Okay.
And I was with two other security policemen, and we had. I want to share the story, but I want to, because it's not only my story. The other two witnesses want to come on and tell it with me, but I will say that we had a very close encounter, a very extraordinary encounter on the base. It was awe-inspiring and completely unbelievable, and it happened, and I called it in. I walked over, I picked up the phone, I called the law enforcement desk, and I told them, here's what just happened. Do me a favor. I think at the time I was the non-commissioned officer in charge of law enforcement.
Okay.
So I was responsible for the law enforcement operations on the base. So I called the desk and I said, here's something that just happened. Told them who I was with. I asked the controllers to contact weather, contact the tower, see if they had anything on radar. And I believe it was put in the Blotter too.
Okay.
And that's another piece of data that I'm hoping Arrow can pull up, my Blotter entry,
Yeah.
my event. And like I said, there have been a lot of things that I am privy to that happened at Vandenberg that are going to be coming out hopefully soon.
That's cool. That's good to hear. Absolutely. I mean, one thing looking back at the 2003 case and the one you mentioned involving yourself there, it doesn't seem, or I haven't got the impression that you faced much stigma on base or when reporting these things. Is that the case?
That was, yeah, when it initially happened, there was no stigma attached to it. And I mean, there were people that didn't want to believe it or just simply ignored it.
Yeah.
Just acted like it was nothing. And there were some people that probably said, it's all nonsense. But the overall vibe was that happened. This is real. And it's extraordinary beyond belief. It changed a lot of people's mind about the fundamental nature of reality. I mean, it completely changed the way I look at the world and everything in it. I mean, for me, it was ontological shock. I had to reevaluate all my beliefs, everything that I had thought was true. So yeah, initially it was excitement, curiosity, and really no stigma.
That's good to hear.
Now, some of the other witnesses that I know that had events in the same time period did not, they were interviewed after their event, and they were made to feel as if they had done something wrong, that they had seen something they should not have seen. They were worried that they might be in trouble because they were debriefed after their incident. So my experience was pretty positive. Other people had uncomfortable experiences for reporting.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we hear a lot of, is that people they do get kind of scared for their careers or any kind of progression with their careers, let's say. We're talking about a lot of different cases here. Has there ever been any kind of word that anything was ever recorded on any kind of visual, system of any sort? Because that's what we all want. We all want to see it for ourselves, don't we? But you always wonder if these installations have some kind of equipment that could record this stuff visually.
And they do. I mean, we had cameras everywhere, but the cameras are watching the perimeter of these facilities. And some of them are only active when an alarm is tripped. And then they'll flash up and then they'll start recording. Some of them are recording 24 hours. But, there is a possibility that some of the remote cameras captured this object approaching. But like I said, the cameras are not, they're pointed out or along the fence line.
Sure.
And they're pointed at ground level.
Yeah.
We're not looking for incursions from the sky. We have other ways to deal with that. The cops are looking at the ground.
Yeah.
So and that's the thing I was hoping Aero might be able to pull. They can pull some security footage. And there's a lot of criticism about, no one had a camera. Nobody pulled out a camera. And it's like, well, in 2003, I had a cell phone, but I don't remember ever taking pictures with it.
No.
It was like a flip phone, and there was no real social media to share back then. At least I didn't have any. And in a lot of these facilities, you can't take a phone in with you. So, if these contractors are working on a top secret project, a lot of times as they enter the entry control point, they have to hand the cops their phone.
Yeah.
They can't go in there.
Nah, that makes sense. Yeah. It's just you always get them people who say, well, why didn't they pull out their cameras or phones? And, I appreciate you kind of explaining that. And I mean, it's 20 years now and it's taken you that long to come out. But did you kind of, following that incident, did you keep an eye on the UFO subject in any way? Or when did it kind of really peak for you?
I did. I've always been interested in it, and I love the X-Files. I'm like, that's the coolest job in the world. I was thinking about going into the FBI for a while, and that was kind of the main thing. I'm like, maybe I'll get to do something cool, so I was always interested in the topic, but I wasn't like fanatic about it.
Sure.
And then for me, after those events, I became more interested, and then I started to read, like Jacques Vallée
Yeah.
and other sources like that. And but the thing is, after it happens, you don't know what to do with it. You just have this story. Now, luckily for me, I had, I used to have the whole file, and it was kind of turned into just a bar story. Like, people would be over my house at a party and barbecuing, and the people that knew about it, we'd start talking about it, and the people that didn't know are like, sure. And then I'd go get the documents and be like, but then things really changed in 2017 for me, when, the New York Times story broke out.
Sure.
And then I was like, now, here we go. But then I learned that this has happened before. There have been hearings before.
Mm-hmm.
Hearings. There have been, credible military people that have come out and talked about these incidents, and they've all been basically ignored and derided. And these people are trying to sell a book. And but I thought 2017. I thought now it's coming out, because people on the inside have disclosed.
Yeah.
We've got some real credible whistleblowers now. And then it just kind of petered out, and I was waiting, and things would trickle out here and there, but I was waiting for this other shoe to drop.
Of course.
And then for me, I have to take breaks from this subject for times. It can be overwhelming, and it is a rabbit hole, and you get lost in it.
Absolutely.
So, over the years, I would get very excited. Things would come out in the news. I would start looking into it, digging into it. And then after a while, it's like, I need a break. I need a break. And then leading up to the hearings, about a year before the hearings, I started to feel this pressure and this momentum building. And I started thinking, I've got data. I don't know who to go with it. And I had, I talked about it on Ryan's podcast. And there was a few times that I was like trying to get it to people. I'd written some emails to people, like, I've got some documentation, but I was very careful about doing that, because the documents I have protected information. They have people's names and addresses and phone numbers and social security numbers. So I wanted to find an avenue to do this the right way.
Yeah.
And I was just sort of waiting. I reached out to a few people in the community that I, over the years, had watched and trusted, different journalists. And, trying to get a hold of a journalist is not easy.
Yeah.
And then everything came to a head, prior to the hearing. I just felt this undeniable urge to act. And I was also inspired, by some of the people who have come out, like some of your work, Ryan Graves, some of the Gary Nolan, Diana Pasolka.
Yeah.
So you have all these people that are highly credible, and they've got the courage to come out and talk about this publicly, and that encouraged me. And then for me, when I learned about Americans for Safe Aerospace, and then the federal government spun up the Aero program, I'm like, okay, now's the time.
Right.
Now's the time for me to get involved. And it was difficult for me, because I'm actually really private, and I was telling Ryan when I first met him, I joined Twitter like in June this year. I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on Facebook. I have an Instagram that I'm barely on. I'm not a social media guy. So for me to come out, it was a lot, because I'm private. And now, that's why at the hearing, when Representative Luna came out, I'm like, oh no, man. And the privacy is gone now. And then I had to just take that leap of faith. And all right, here we go.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak personally. I'm so glad you did come forward. It's good to have this information out into the public domain. And, it's great that you were able to bring that forward. So, thank you on my behalf, but I'm sure I speak on behalf of a lot of people in the community as well. And, hopefully we do get to hear from some of the witnesses you mentioned earlier on the show. I think I said this to you privately. They're always welcome here if they want a platform to come and speak freely and openly without judgment. Please pass that message on. But yeah, I mean, Jeff, if there's anything you think we haven't talked about that you'd like to mention, please let me know.
I mean, that's about. I mean, there's a lot to talk about, sure, but I can't think of anything at the moment.
Nah. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on. Like I said, so much. It's an absolute honor to speak with you. And yeah.
Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege, and your work is amazing. And anything I can do to help. And like I said, I've told these other witnesses that you're willing and that they're preparing. They're getting ready to come out. So I'll let them know. And anything you need, let me know.
Definitely, man. Stay in touch. I appreciate it so much, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Anytime. And to everyone watching this, whether it's in the future on audio, thank you so much for the continued support. And we will be back on a weekly basis with a new interview. But for now, everyone, take care. Goodbye.